My friends, let us come together in a spirit of deep stillness and receptivity, for the truth we are about to consider cannot be grasped through the intellect, nor can it be approached as one more idea added to our storehouse of beliefs. It must be felt within, recognized in the quietness of our own being. There comes a moment in the life of every seeker when the question of life and death, of the appearing and disappearing of form, stands before us not as theology, not as philosophy, but as direct experience. It is in this moment that the truth of our identity is revealed most clearly if we are willing to see it. We have, for centuries, regarded death as an enemy, as a dark and terrible event that closes the door upon all that we have known. Yet this fear has been born only of one mistake: the belief that life is in the body, that the body is the self, and that the dissolution of the physical form is the dissolution of our being. This, my friends, is the great misunderstanding. The body is not the life. Consciousness is the life. The I that I am is the life eternal. And when we begin to perceive this, even faintly, the fear of death begins to lose its power over us. In the final months of my earthly life, there was no battle with death, no desperate attempt to hold the body together, no appeal to an external God to preserve a form that was never the seat of identity. Instead, there was only the quiet recognition that the life which animates, sustains, and maintains itself as this awareness has no beginning and no ending. What appears as birth, what appears as death, these are movements within consciousness, but they do not touch the one who witnesses them. And so, as we enter this subject today, let us not approach it as though we were studying the end of something. We are studying the revelation of something. We are studying the moment in which the personal sense of life falls away and the presence that has always been there, the I that is God, itself expressing as individual consciousness, shines forth in its purity. We are studying the truth that stands behind the veil of appearances. Let your heart be at ease. We are not here to contemplate loss, but to recognize gain. We are not here to mourn the frailty of the form, but to witness the eternality of the formless. And as we proceed, let us hold this one simple truth before us. No one has ever died. Forms have come and gone. Bodies have appeared and disappeared. But the invisible presence, the I that is God, remains untouched, unchanged, eternally expressing itself as the life you are. When we see this clearly, the great fear dissolves, and it is in this dissolving that true freedom begins. My friends, let us look gently and honestly at this matter of fear, for fear is not conquered by force, nor is it dissolved by effort. Fear is dispelled only by light, by the recognition of what is eternally true. And nowhere is fear more deeply rooted in human consciousness than in the belief that life can be taken from us, that existence can be threatened, and that identity can come to an end. It is very important that we do not condemn ourselves for this fear. Even the most sincere spiritual seeker may find that when the sense world presses upon him with its testimony of pain, decline, or danger, an instinctive tightening arises. This is not a moral failing, nor is it proof that we have been unfaithful to truth. It is simply the residue of centuries of conditioning human belief accepted as reality long before we had awakened to the nature of our true being. The universal fear of death is not personal. It is not your fear or my fear. It is the collective fear of a world that has identified itself with the body, this temporary form, this garment of flesh, and has forgotten the invisible life that animates it. When we speak of death, we are really speaking of the belief that life is in matter, dependent upon matter, and vulnerable because matter is subject to change. Let us understand this clearly. Fear persists only where we still believe we are separate from the source of life. Fear lives only in the conviction that we are self-contained, isolated beings struggling to preserve our existence. But the very moment we glimpse even faintly that the life we are living is not personal life but God life, not human existence but divine expression, that fear begins to lose its footing. Many spiritual seekers wonder, why, after all my study, all my meditation, all my spiritual practice, does fear still arise when the body is threatened? The answer is simple. The surface mind has accepted the truth, but it has not yet permeated the deeper levels of conditioning. We may intellectually declare, I am eternal, yet still reflexively behave as though the body were our life. These two layers must become one. And so I say to you with tenderness, do not be discouraged when fear appears. Fear appearing is not a sign of spiritual failure, it is an invitation to deeper recognition. It is the opportunity to turn once again to the truth that the life you are is not in the body, nor is it subject to the changes that touch the body. Fear arises only because we have momentarily forgotten who we are. And the moment we remember, truly remember, not as a belief but as a simple recognition, fear dissolves, not because we have pushed it away, but because there is nothing left in us for it to cling to. Every fear is a shadow of forgotten truth, and death is the greatest shadow of all. But when the light of I Am dawns in consciousness, even this shadow cannot remain. Now, let us turn gently to that period in which the physical form known as Joel Goldsmith moved toward its conclusion. I speak of these things not to stir emotion, nor to create a story about a person, but to show you how the principles we study become living demonstration when appearances grow most intense. The outer scene of those final months was simple: a body in decline, symptoms increasing, strength diminishing, and the natural processes that accompany the closing of physical life making themselves known. To the human eye, this is the point at which fear rises most sharply. The world believes that when the body weakens, life weakens. When the body deteriorates, identity deteriorates. When the body comes to its end, the person comes to an end. But this is precisely the moment when the one who has lived in truth knows that none of this touches the reality of being. During those days, there was pain, there was limitation, there was what the world calls terminal illness. But listen carefully. There was no personal sense of suffering, because the one who had spent a lifetime practicing the presence did not identify himself with the sensations of the body. He acknowledged them, yes, of course. Denial never plays a part in spiritual realization, but he did not take ownership of them. He allowed the body to be the body, the appearance to be the appearance, while resting in that quiet inner knowing, I am the life which is God. I am the presence that neither waxes nor wanes. I am the awareness in which this body appears, moves, and eventually dissolves. There was no attempt to force healing, no attempt to cling to physical continuity. Why? Because he understood the body to be an instrument useful for a time, then released when its function is complete. There is no tragedy in this, any more than there is tragedy in setting aside a garment that has become worn. The garment serves its purpose and is laid aside, but the one who wore it continues unchanged. And so the atmosphere around him in those days was one of quietness, not darkness, not fear, not dread quietness, a deep stillness that arises when the battle with appearances has ended, when consciousness no longer tries to control, improve, or preserve form, but simply beholds. Those who were near him reported no sense of struggle, no frantic searching for remedies, no pleading for intervention. There was only a soft resting in the presence that had guided his entire journey. That resting was not resignation, let us be clear. Resignation is a gesture of defeat. This was recognition. Recognition that the life which lived as Joel Goldsmith was never born into a body and could not be removed by the departure of a body. Recognition that the I which spoke through him from the beginning was the same I that existed before Abraham was, the same I that is the life of every individual who hears these words now. It is important to see the outer scene only as context, not as truth. The truth was in the stillness, in the non-reaction, in the peaceful abiding. The truth was in the refusal to accept the body's condition as a statement about identity. And in this way, even the final days of the physical form became a teaching not in words, but in demonstration. This is the opportunity every one of us has, not merely at the end of life, but every time the body or circumstances bear witness to change. The appearance is never the truth. The truth stands behind it as the silent, eternal presence that is our very being. Now, my friends, let us look more deeply at what was taking place during those final months, for this is where the real teaching lies. The outer appearance of a declining body is of no great significance. Bodies come and go, and they have done so since time began. What matters is the state of consciousness from which we meet these appearances. This is the entire secret of spiritual life, the recognition of the I that is eternal, even as the forms through which it expresses rise and fall in their appointed season. The inner practice in those days was the same practice that had been lived for decades. No new technique was introduced, no special meditation for the dying, no urgent prayer for deliverance. For truth does not change with circumstances. Truth is the same whether we are walking through a garden or lying upon a sick bed. And so the practice was simply this: resting in the awareness of I am. I am the presence that has no beginning and no ending. I am the life that is self-sustained and self-complete. I am the light that cannot be dimmed by shadows of material belief. I am the only identity anyone has ever had. In that recognition, there is no need to resist sensations, no need to argue with the body's condition, no need to attempt to shape appearances by thought. The mind grows very quiet, for it is no longer trying to control life. It is simply resting in life itself. This resting is not passivity. It is the highest form of activity, though it appears outwardly as stillness. It is the activity of divine awareness flowing without obstruction. It is the activity of truth dissolving the belief in a personal self. It is the activity of light, revealing that there is no darkness except the shadow cast by ignorance. During those days, there would be times when the body expressed discomfort, yet there was no inward tightening, no sense of this is happening to me. There was only the recognition. This, too, is an appearance in consciousness. It is not the truth of my being. And in that non-identification, suffering could not take root. Sensation may arise in the body, but suffering requires a me to suffer, and that me had long since been seen as an illusion. This is the heart of the inner practice, allowing everything to be as it is on the plane of appearance, while resting firmly in the knowing of what is true on the plane of reality. The spiritual student does not attempt to heal appearances. The spiritual student awakens to the truth behind appearances, and the truth is always this: the I that you are does not enter the body at birth, nor does it leave the body at death. The I that you are is the witnessing presence, not the form, witnessed. The I that you are is the life that lives itself, untouched by decay, untouched by endings, untouched by change. To rest in this recognition is to walk in the freedom of the sons of God. And it is this recognition, this silent, effortless recognition that carried the transition peacefully, naturally, and without fear. For when one abides in I am, there is no death to face, only a gentle releasing of the temporary form through which this infinite presence once expressed. This is not something reserved for a few. It is the natural heritage of every individual who turns within and acknowledges, I live, yet not I, but the Christ. This I am is the life that lives me. Let us go deeper now into this word immortality, for it is a term so often misunderstood. The world hears the word and imagines a personal life extended indefinitely, a human identity preserved eternally, or a body made indestructible by spiritual power. But, my friends, none of this is what immortality means in the life of the spirit. What is immortal is not the personality. What is immortal is not the human sense of self. What is immortal is not the body or the circumstances of our earthly journey. Immortality belongs only to that which was never born and therefore can never die. And so the first great revelation we must come to is this: there is no such thing as personal immortality. The person, as the world knows it, the name, the form, the accumulated history, has no continuity in spirit. The person appears in time and is dissolved in time, but the life that animates that person, the consciousness that shines through it, the presence that says I, that is eternal, that is the only immortality there is. When I speak of immortality, I speak of that which is alive right now as the awareness hearing these words. I speak of the one who is conscious of existing, yet whose existence does not depend upon the body, nor upon the world, nor upon any external condition. This I, this pure, unconditioned awareness, is the Christ, the Self, the infinite way. It does not begin at conception, nor does it end at death. It stands ever present behind all appearances. The purpose of spiritual living is not to preserve the body forever, but to awaken to the truth that the body is not the seat of your identity. In this awakening, fear dissolves, not because we have conquered death, but because we have seen that nothing real can die. What dies is the picture, what dies is the form, what dies is the mask through which the infinite has temporarily expressed, but the infinite itself remains unchanged. If you examine the great statements of the Master, you will find that he never identified life with the body. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. These statements do not refer to a man. They refer to the eternal presence speaking through the man. The I am is the immortality of every individual. This is why, in those final days, there was no sense of loss, no anticipation of ending, no clinging to the form. There was only the recognition that the I which had lived the entire span of the human experience was the same I that lived before that experience began and would continue after that experience concluded. Immortality, then, is not something to be attained. It is not a reward. It is not a future state. Immortality is the present reality of your being. It is the truth that is already here, already complete, already expressing itself as the consciousness that is aware in this moment. You do not become immortal. You awaken to the immortality that has always been yours. The more clearly this truth is realized, the more gently we move through life, for all fear of loss is rooted in the belief that what we are can be diminished. And once that belief dissolves, a great peace arises, an unshakable peace, a peace not dependent upon circumstance. This is the immortality Joel Goldsmith revealed, not in theory, but in living demonstration. And it is this immortality that you, too, will feel. the moment you turn within and recognize, I am the life eternal, appearing now as this individual expression, yet untouched by all the changes on the surface of experience. As we move further into this sacred subject, let us turn our attention away from the outer picture of declining physical form and consider the inner experience, for the outer appearance of a dissolving body tells us nothing about the life that is living itself. Truth reveals itself not in what the senses behold, but in the awareness with which we meet the senses' report. And so, in those final months, the essential activity was not of the body, nor of the mind, but of consciousness resting in its own eternal nature. There were moments when the body spoke loudly, moments of discomfort, moments of fatigue, moments in which the natural processes of physical dissolution made themselves known. Yet even in these moments, there was no inner disturbance, for the one beholding these sensations was not identified with them. That is the great key. Sensations arose in the body, but there was no me in them. They appeared, they passed, and they had no power to create suffering because there was no personal self claiming them. This inner state was not produced through effort. It was not a discipline imposed upon the mind. It was the natural fruit of decades spent in the quiet recognition that I can of mine own self do nothing, and that the life which animates us is God, appearing as individual being. When one has lived from this recognition long enough, identity shifts. The personal sense of self dissolves little by little, and in its place arises the awareness of I am, the universal identity expressing as the individual. It is this shift that made possible the profound peace present in those final days. There was no internal conversation of why is this happening or how can I change this, for those questions belong only to the mind that believes itself separate. Instead, there was a simple and natural abiding. The body is doing what bodies do, but I am not the body. I am the life that witnesses the body. Some have imagined that spiritual mastery means the body should always respond instantly to truth, or that the physical form should be immune to decline. But this is a misunderstanding rooted in the belief that spirit exists to preserve matter. Spirit does not preserve matter. Spirit reveals itself through matter for a season in its own perfect way. And when that season is complete, spirit continues without interruption, without loss, without change. This is what was unfolding within. The inner experience was quiet, not dramatic, not filled with visions or heavenly signs. There were no triumphal declarations, no ecstatic revelations, just a deep, unbroken awareness of presence. A simple knowing, I am, I always have been, I always will be. The form may fade, but I do not. This simplicity is what many seekers overlook. They expect the spiritual path to culminate in great supernatural display, but true realization is not supernatural. It is utterly natural, so natural, in fact, that the world often misses it. It comes with no fireworks, only the gentle disappearance of fear, the quiet dissolution of resistance, the soft abiding in what has always been present. And so, as the body declined, the consciousness behind the form grew clearer, more transparent, more free. There was no clinging, because there was nothing to cling to. There was no fear, because there was no belief in separation from life. There was no sorrow, because what could be lost? The form? Yes. But the self? Never. This is what Goldsmith experienced internally, a deep continuity of being, unbroken by the appearance of bodily change. And you, too, may taste the same continuity, not by imitating an attitude, but by recognizing the truth that the I which lives you now is the same I that lived him, the same I that lives all. The body passes, but I am remains. Now, my friends, let us gently turn from the appearance of one man's transition and consider what this demonstration reveals about your own life, your own consciousness, your own journey on this path. For the significance of those final days lies not in the story of Joel Goldsmith, but in the light they shed upon the truth of your being. Every event in the life of a spiritual teacher holds meaning only to the degree that it awakens recognition within you. And so we ask, what does this reveal about the life you are living now? First, it reveals that the fear of death, the deepest fear known to humanity, is not dissolved by changing circumstances, but by changing identity. You do not overcome fear by adjusting the conditions of your human experience. You overcome fear only by recognizing that the one who seems to fear is not the one you truly are. When identity shifts from the personal self to the I am, fear naturally dissolves, because the I am cannot be threatened. Second, his passing shows us that your security has never depended on the body. Your safety, your continuity, your very existence do not rest upon the strength of your physical form. The body may be healthy or ill, young or old, vigorous or frail, but the life that animates it remains untouched. When you recognize this, truly recognize it, you begin to meet life's challenges with a calmness the world cannot understand. You begin to live from a place of stability that is not conditioned by the senses. Third, you discover that nothing in your experience is as serious as you once believed. When you look at your life from the perspective of eternal being, the troubles that once seemed overwhelming lose their weight. Financial pressures, relationship tensions, bodily discomforts. These remain the appearances they always were, but the sense of me that struggles with them begins to fade. You learn to let things arise and pass without being shaken, because you are centered in the awareness that beholds them. Fourth, you are shown that spiritual realization is practical. It is not something reserved for moments of meditation or spiritual ecstasy. It is not something to be attained in the final days of life. It is to be lived now in the midst of your daily responsibilities, your everyday interactions, your ordinary challenges. Every moment is an opportunity to rest in the truth that the life you are is not the life of the body, not the life of the personality, but the life of God expressing as individual being. Fifth, you learn that the transition called death is not a dramatic event. It is not a rupture in consciousness. It is not a moment of terror or sudden awakening. It is simply the continuation of the same life that is present right now. The consciousness you bring to this moment is the consciousness you bring to that moment. If you live now with fear, you carry fear into that transition. If you live now in recognition, you carry recognition. And so the true work is always here, always now. Finally, his passing teaches you that you are not walking toward a final moment of loss. You are walking toward the deeper unveiling of what you already are. Every day, every challenge, every joy, every sorrow, every appearance of change is part of the slow, gentle dissolving of the belief that you are separate from the source of your being. And as this belief fades, you begin to live differently. You become less reactive, more spacious, more compassionate, not because you try to be, but because the false sense of self is losing its hold. You see, the truth is very simple. The life that lived as Joel Goldsmith is the same life that lives as you. The same I that expressed through his form is expressing through your form. There are not many lives. There is only one life, one presence, one consciousness, appearing as many forms. His passing merely revealed in a clear and quiet way, the truth that has always been true for all. And when you recognize this, your own life begins to change, not because you adopt new beliefs, but because you awaken to the reality that has been present from the beginning. My friends, having contemplated the nature of immortality and the quiet clarity that accompanied those final days, let us now turn to the practical dimension of this teaching. For truth, to be truth, must be lived. It must permeate our daily experience. It must become the atmosphere through which we meet every appearance, whether joyful or challenging. And so the question arises, how do we approach our own mortality in the same spirit of peace and recognition? How do we prepare not for death, but for the continual unveiling of life? The first and most essential practice is the practice of silence without agenda. Sit quietly each day, even for only a few minutes, without asking, without desiring, without seeking to change any condition. Simply rest in the awareness that I am here. This silence allows the mind to sink beneath the turbulence of thought and touch the deep stillness in which the presence reveals itself, not because we call it forth, but because it is already here. This simple resting begins to loosen the belief that life is something we must manage or protect. Second, begin to see the body with new eyes. The body is not to be despised, nor feared, nor clung to. It is the instrument through which life expresses in this dimension for a season. You care for it naturally, the way one tends to a garden or maintains a home, but you do so without identifying with it. The body may change, but the eye that witnesses the change is unchanging. As you gently, repeatedly see the body as an appearance in consciousness rather than the container of consciousness, you begin to feel an inner freedom that no condition can shake. Third, allow fear thoughts to arise without resisting them. Do not make a battle of the mind. When fear appears, simply acknowledge, this too is a universal belief appearing in my awareness. Do not claim it as yours. Do not struggle with it. Let it pass as clouds pass through the sky. The sky is not disturbed by the clouds, and consciousness is not disturbed by thoughts unless we identify with them. In this way, fear loses its foothold. Fourth, develop the habit of returning again and again to the simple recognition of I am, not as a phrase, not as an affirmation, but as a lived awareness. In moments of stillness, feel into this presence. In moments of difficulty, remember it. In moments of joy, acknowledge it. The more often you return to this recognition, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it becomes spontaneous, effortless, automatic. And this is the beginning of living from the Christ within. Fifth, release the notion that you must purify the mind, perfect the personality, or perform great spiritual feats. The spiritual life is not a project. It is not a path of self-improvement. It is simply the steady relaxing of the false sense of self until the true emerges in clarity. You do not build the Christ identity. You uncover it, and you uncover it by doing less, not more. Sixth, contemplate often the truth that whatever can die was never you. This contemplation need not be morbid or heavy. It is liberating. Let the thought arise in simplicity. If this body were to fall away this very moment, would the witnessing presence disappear with it? And immediately you will feel the answer, no, I remain. You experience this every night when the body sleeps. You experience it in deep silence when the sense of me disappears. You experience it in moments of awareness when there is no thinker, only presence. Finally, recognize that the preparation for death is simply the preparation for life. There is no special practice for the final day. There is only the daily recognition of truth until the fear-based identity dissolves. Whether you are young or old, healthy or facing illness, the work is always the same. Return to the I am. Rest in the presence. Let the personal sense diminish. Let the eternal self reveal itself. In this way, you approach mortality not as a fearful event, but as a gentle transition, no more significant than the passing of one season into another. When that moment comes, it will be met with the same peace, the same unbroken awareness, the same recognition that guided every step of your life. For the one who knows the I am does not prepare for death. He abides in life, and life continues. My friends, let us come now to a gentle close, and as we do, I would invite you to rest not in thought, not in theory, but in the quiet awareness that is present even now, even here. For everything that has been shared, every truth that has unfolded, every glimpse into the eternal nature of your being has had but one purpose: to lead you home to the awareness of the presence that lives you. There is no journey to complete. There is no finish line to reach. There is no distant spiritual attainment awaiting you in some far-off future. What you seek, you already are. The life you have feared losing has never been yours to lose, for it is not personal life. It is the infinite expressing itself as individual consciousness, one life, one being, one I. When we look upon the transition called death, we do not look upon an ending. We look upon a passing of form, a shedding of the temporary garment. But you, the witnessing presence, are not touched by it. You are the same before, during, and after. The form may fall away, yes, but the life that animates the form does not fall away. It simply withdraws from one appearance and continues, unbroken, as it always has. And so the truth is this: you are not moving toward death. You are moving moment by moment into deeper recognition of life. You are not approaching a point of darkness. You are moving toward the dawning of your own eternal nature. Every fear, every challenge, every moment of stillness, every step on the path, these are not random events. They are invitations, each one calling you to rest more deeply in the I that is God. Let your heart be at peace. You are not fragile. You are not temporary. You are not a creature struggling to survive in a dangerous world. You are the very presence of God, made visible as individual being. You are the light of the Christ, the awareness of I am, appearing here, appearing now, expressing itself in the unique form that the world calls you. The body is a beautiful instrument. Use it, care for it, cherish it while it serves its purpose, but do not mistake it for your life. Let it come, let it go, let it change, let it rest. Through all of this, you remain the silent, watching, eternal self. If you do nothing else as a result of these words, let it be this: turn within each day, even for a moment, and recognize the presence that lives you. Let that recognition become your refuge, your strength, your peace. For in that recognition lies the end of fear, the end of struggle, the end of the belief in separation. In that recognition lies your freedom. And when the time comes for this form to be released, it will not be a moment of terror. It will be a moment of surrender into the very life that has carried you from the beginning. You will recognize it not as the end, but as the continuation of what has always been. The presence that lives you now will live you then. The I that is aware now will be aware then. The life that you are will simply flow into a new expression. Rest, then, in the assurance that nothing real can be lost, nothing eternal can be threatened, and you are eternal. I am is your name. I am is your identity. I am is your immortality. And in that I am, we are one.
Imagine for a moment that every battle you've been fighting, every struggle with lack, with fear, with illness, with discord, has been nothing more than shadow boxing. You've been exhausting yourself against phantoms while the real power, the Christ presence, has been standing by, waiting for you to step aside and say, "Not by my might, but by thy Spirit." What if I told you that your greatest spiritual breakthrough comes not from fighting harder, but from fighting less? Jesus said, "Take heart, your battle is mine." There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when we must face a profound truth that shakes the very foundation of how we've been living. We have been taught to struggle, to overcome, to demonstrate our faith through effort and persistence. But what if the entire premise has been backwards? Jesus said, "Take heart, for I have overcome the world. Not I will help you overcome, not together we shall overcome, but I have overcome." Past tense, already accomplished. The victory exists before you ever perceived the battle. This is the great revelation that transforms everything, the nature of true spiritual warfare. You see, most of us come to the spiritual path still carrying the weapons of the material world. We think we must fight lack with affirmations of abundance. We think we must battle disease with declarations of health. We think we must overcome fear through mental exercises of courage, but this is still engaging with the problem on its own terms. This is still accepting the reality of the condition and then trying to change it. And herein lies our difficulty. The Christ message is not that you must overcome these conditions. The Christ message is that these conditions have no reality in the kingdom of God. They exist only in the dream of material sense, in the illusion of separation from the divine source. When Jesus said, "Your battle is mine," he was revealing something extraordinary. He was not saying, "I will help you in your battle." He was saying the battle itself belongs to a realm of consciousness where the Christ operates, not where you, as a human being, must struggle. The practice of non-resistance. Now, this requires a complete reversal of our habitual thinking. We have been conditioned to believe that we must do something about every problem. If we're sick, we must seek healing. If we're poor, we must create prosperity. If we're troubled, we must find peace. But watch what happens in the consciousness of the mystic. The mystic does not fight the disease. The mystic realizes health is already established in divine consciousness. The mystic does not struggle for supply. The mystic rests in the awareness of infinite abundance already present. This is not positive thinking. This is spiritual discernment. Jesus demonstrated this perfectly when he stood before Pilate. He did not defend himself. He did not argue. He did not resist. Why? Because he was living from a dimension of consciousness where the accusations had no power, where the threats had no substance, where even death itself was revealed as an illusion. Becoming transparent to truth, the illusion of personal battling, understanding that our struggles exist only in the realm of human perception, not in spiritual reality, the impersonal nature of divine power. Recognizing that God's work is not dependent on our effort, but flows through our receptivity, resting in the presence. The practice of stillness as the gateway to allowing Christ to fight our battles beyond demonstrations to realization. Moving from seeking outcomes to dwelling in the consciousness of truth, living as transparency. Becoming channels through which divine grace operates without personal interference, When we look honestly at our spiritual lives, most of us discover we have been engaged in an exhausting enterprise of trying to overcome conditions through personal effort. We wake each morning and survey the landscape of our existence, our health, our finances, our relationships, our state of... And immediately we begin the work of improvement, of correction, of demonstration. We affirm truth. We deny error, we visualize outcomes, we declare our divine inheritance. And yet, the struggles continue. The battles seem endless. Why? Because we have accepted the fundamental premise that these conditions are real and must be fought against. This is the great illusion that keeps us bound to the wheel of human effort. We believe the lack is real, so we must demonstrate abundance. We believe the disease is real, so we must demonstrate healing. We believe the discord is real, so we must demonstrate harmony. But in accepting the reality of these conditions, we have already lost the spiritual battle. We have agreed to fight on the enemy's territory, using weapons that have no power in the spiritual realm. The mystical revelation begins when you recognize that the battle itself exists only in the dream of material sense. In divine consciousness, there is no lack to overcome because infinity is already present. There is no disease to heal because life is eternal and indestructible. There is no discord to harmonize because divine love is the only reality. The conditions you are fighting against are shadows cast by the belief in separation from God. They have no substance, no law, no power to sustain themselves except through your continued acceptance of them as real. This does not mean you deny your present experience or pretend problems do not exist in the human picture. It means you stop giving them spiritual validity. You stop treating them as if they were established in divine law. You recognize them as temporary appearances that arise from the mist of human consciousness and dissolve when the light of spiritual awareness dawns. The battle you have been fighting is with phantoms, and the exhaustion you feel comes from swinging at shadows. When you cease to give these appearances the status of reality, when you stop engaging them as if they were divinely ordained conditions, requiring your personal effort to overcome, you discover something remarkable. They begin to lose their power over you, not because you fought them successfully, but because you withdrew your belief in their reality. The great error in most spiritual practice is the assumption that God's power operates through our personal will, our mental clarity, or our spiritual worthiness. We think that if we meditate correctly, affirm properly, or pray with enough faith, then divine power will respond to our efforts and produce the results we seek. This is still making God subject to human action, still placing the burden of demonstration on our shoulders, still living as if the infinite requires our finite cooperation to accomplish its work. But observe what happens in true spiritual consciousness. Divine power does not wait for your permission. It does not depend on the quality of your meditation or the intensity of your desire. It does not measure your worthiness or check your spiritual credentials. The sun does not shine more brightly on the saint than on the sinner. Rain falls on the just and unjust alike. Divine grace is impersonal, not cold or indifferent, but operating according to spiritual law rather than human petition. This impersonal nature of God is perhaps the most liberating truth you can realize. It means you cannot earn divine favor through good behavior, nor can you lose it through failure. It means your demonstrations are not dependent on achieving some perfect state of consciousness, but on recognizing what already is, the power that governs the universe, that maintains the planets in their orbits and causes the seed to become the mighty tree, does not require your assistance. It requires only your non-interference. When you attempt to use spiritual power for personal purposes, to heal your body, to increase your wealth, to manipulate circumstances, you are still operating from the ego consciousness that believes it is separate from the divine source and must petition it for favors. But when you rest in the awareness that divine intelligence is already functioning perfectly, that infinite abundance is already flowing, that eternal life is already present, then you become transparent to that power. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are allowing what already is to reveal itself through your consciousness. This is why the mystic does not pray for things, but rests in the presence. The mystic does not seek to direct divine power, but to be directed by it. The mystic becomes the instrument through which impersonal divine grace flows into visibility, not through personal effort or worthiness, but through the simple practice of receptivity and recognition. In the midst of our daily struggles, we rush from one solution to another, from one technique to the next, believing that somewhere in the arsenal of spiritual methods lies the answer to our problems. We think if we just pray harder, meditate longer, affirm more powerfully, we will finally break through to the demonstration we seek. But all this activity, all this spiritual busyness keeps us locked in the very consciousness that created the problem. We are still operating from the belief that we must do something, achieve something, become something other than what we already are in God. The practice of stillness is not another technique to add to your collection of spiritual methods. It is the cessation of all techniques, the laying down of all personal effort, the complete surrender of the belief that you can make something happen through your own power. When you become still, you are not trying to contact God, for God is already present. You are not trying to receive guidance, for divine intelligence is already functioning. You are not trying to create peace, for the peace of God is already established as your true nature. This stillness is an act of trust so profound that the human mind cannot comprehend it. You are trusting that in the absence of your personal striving, divine grace will operate. You are trusting that when you stop interfering with the flow of infinite intelligence, the perfect outcome will manifest. You are trusting that the same power that breathes your body, beats your heart, and maintains the entire universe in perfect order, can also handle whatever situation appears before you. In this silence, something extraordinary happens. The Christ consciousness, which has been obscured by the noise of personal sense, begins to emerge, not as something you have created or achieved, but as what has always been present beneath the surface turbulence of human thought. This Christ presence does not fight your battles. It reveals that the battles themselves are illusions arising from the dream of separation. In stillness, you discover that the healing you sought was already accomplished, the supply you needed was already present, the peace you desired was already established. The work is not to create these things, but to be still enough to perceive what divine consciousness has already made eternally available. Most students of spiritual truth remain trapped in the consciousness of seeking demonstrations. They want to demonstrate health, demonstrate supply, demonstrate harmony in their relationships. They measure their spiritual progress by the visible results they can produce in the outer world. If the demonstration appears, they feel they have succeeded. If it does not, they believe they have failed or that they need more understanding, better technique, stronger faith. But this entire approach keeps them bound to the world of effects, forever chasing outcomes, forever judging their spiritual life by material conditions. The mystic discovers something far more profound than demonstration. The mystic discovers realization. What is the difference? Demonstration implies that something is lacking and must be brought into existence through spiritual work. Realization recognizes that nothing is lacking, because divine completeness is already established. Demonstration operates in the realm of time. You are trying to change a condition from what it is now to what you want it to be in the future. Realization operates in the eternal now, where divine perfection is already present and needs only to be recognized. When you live in the consciousness of realization, you are not seeking to change your life. You are awakening to what your life already is in spiritual reality. You are not trying to heal your body. You are realizing that divine life knows no sickness. You are not trying to attract abundance. You are recognizing that infinite supply is the very nature of God expressing as your experience. This is not mere positive thinking or mental gymnastics. This is the direct perception of spiritual truth. The shift from seeking demonstrations to dwelling in realization transforms your entire spiritual practice. You stop begging, pleading, affirming, visualizing, and manipulating. You begin simply to rest in awareness. You abide in the consciousness of truth. You live from the recognition that God is the only presence and the only power. In this consciousness, what the world calls miracles happen naturally. Not because you made them happen, but because the illusions that obscured spiritual reality have dissolved in the light of your awareness. You are no longer trying to demonstrate God's presence. You are living as the presence itself made manifest. The ultimate spiritual attainment is not to become a powerful person who can demonstrate truth, but to become so transparent that divine grace flows through you without obstruction. This is the consciousness Jesus embodied when he said, "I of mine own self do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works." He was not claiming personal power or spiritual superiority. He was revealing that he had become completely transparent to the divine presence, allowing it to function without the interference of personal will, personal ambition, or personal sense. Most of us approach the spiritual path with the goal of becoming better, stronger, more enlightened versions of ourselves. We want to be the one who heals, the one who demonstrates, the one who overcomes. But this is still the ego consciousness operating under spiritual disguise. We are still claiming a personal identity separate from God, an identity that can achieve spiritual things. True spiritual maturity comes when you realize that there is no personal you to achieve anything. There is only divine consciousness expressing itself as individual being. Living as transparency means you no longer take credit for the good that appears in your life, nor do you blame yourself for the challenges. You recognize that both the appearances of harmony and discord arise from the degree to which consciousness is clear or clouded. Your work is not to make things happen, but to keep the window of consciousness clean, to remove the obstructions of personal desire, personal fear, personal judgment that block the free flow of divine grace. This requires a complete reversal of everything the world has taught you. The world says, build yourself up, make yourself strong, develop your personal power. The spiritual path says, decrease so that he may increase. Empty yourself so that divine fullness can pour through. Become nothing so that the all can express itself as you. This is not self-negation or false humility. This is the recognition that your true identity has never been the limited personal sense of self, but the infinite consciousness of God individualized. When you live as transparency, you become a channel of blessing to everyone you encounter, not because you are doing anything, but because the Christ presence flows through you unobstructed, healing, prospering, harmonizing, not by your will but by its own nature. And so we come to the place where words must give way to silence, where teaching must yield to practice, where understanding must dissolve into living experience. You have heard the message that your battles are not yours to fight. You have been reminded that divine power operates impersonally, requiring only your receptivity. You have been invited into the stillness where Christ consciousness emerges. You have discovered the difference between seeking demonstrations and dwelling in realization. And you have been shown the path of transparency, where personal sense dissolves and divine grace flows freely. But none of this becomes real until you live it. None of this transforms your experience until you practice it in the moments when fear arises, when lack appears, when discord threatens to overwhelm you. In those moments you must remember, this battle is not mine. I of mine own self can do nothing, but the Christ within me has already overcome. The spiritual life is not complicated. It is actually the simplest thing in the world. It requires only that you stop, that you be still, that you release your grip on personal effort and allow divine grace to have its way. Every morning you begin again with this consciousness. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice transparency. Every moment is an invitation to rest in the presence rather than struggle in personal sense. Take heart, not because the path ahead is easy, but because the journey is already complete. The victory is already won. The Christ has already overcome the world. All that remains is for you to awaken to this truth, to live from this consciousness, to become so transparent that the world looking at you sees not you at all, but the very presence of God made visible. This is your spiritual destiny. This is your divine inheritance. This is the truth that sets you free. Go now in peace, knowing that you go not alone, not by personal power, but as the very presence of the infinite expressing itself in time and space. Let your life be the evidence that Christ lives, not as a distant Savior, but as the very consciousness with which you meet each moment. The battle is His, the victory is assured, and you are the transparency through which divine grace accomplishes what human effort never could. Be still, rest, allow, and watch as the Christ within reveals its eternal nature as your only reality. Here is the practical application of this teaching. You must learn to become transparent. You must learn to step aside and let the Christ consciousness operate through you, not as you. When a problem presents itself, and problems will present themselves as long as you appear to be in human form, your first response must not be to fix it, to heal it, or to overcome it. Your first response must be to pause, to become still, and to realize, this is not my battle. I do not have the power to overcome this through human effort, but the Christ within me has already overcome all worldly conditions. This is not passivity. This is the highest form of spiritual activity, the activity of receptivity, of openness, of allowing divine grace to flow unobstructed by personal sense. The freedom in surrender. Many students misunderstand surrender. They think it means giving up, becoming weak, or accepting defeat. But true spiritual surrender is the recognition that there never was a you separate from God who could fight these battles in the first place. When you surrender, you're not surrendering to the problem. You're surrendering the illusion that you are separate from the divine source, separate from infinite wisdom, separate from eternal life. Jesus could say, "Take heart," because he knew that in spiritual reality there is nothing to fear. The world of appearances may present 1,000 challenges, but these are like waves on the surface of an infinite ocean. The depths remain undisturbed, peaceful, whole. Living from realization, now we come to the heart of the teaching. You cannot live this truth through belief alone. You cannot intellectually understand it and expect transformation. This teaching must become a living realization within your consciousness. What does this mean practically? It means that when discord appears, you do not immediately react with human solutions. You turn within, you become still, you listen, and in that silence you allow the Christ consciousness to reveal the nothingness of the appearance and the allness of God. It means that when lack seems to surround you, you do not panic or scheme. You rest in the awareness that divine consciousness knows no lack, that infinity cannot be depleted, that the source of all supply is forever flowing. It means that when fear knocks at your door, you do not battle it with affirmations. You recognize that perfect love casts out fear not by fighting it, but by revealing its unreality in the light of divine presence. The daily practice. How do you live this teaching moment by moment? You begin each day by releasing all sense of personal responsibility for your life, not irresponsibly, but spiritually. You acknowledge, of my own self, I can do nothing, but the Father within me does the works. Throughout your day, when challenges arise, you practice the pause. Before responding, before reacting, before engaging with the problem on its own terms, you pause and remember, this battle is not mine. The Christ within me has already overcome. You develop the habit of inner listening, not for instructions on what to do, but for the realization of what already is. You're not seeking guidance on how to fix your life. You're seeking the awareness that your life, in spiritual reality, is already whole, already complete, already at peace. Take heart, so I leave you with this. Take heart. Not because your problems will magically disappear, but because you are being invited into a dimension of consciousness where problems have no power, where challenges have no substance, where the entire drama of human existence is revealed as the dream from which we are awakening. Your battle is not yours because there is no battle in spiritual reality. There is only the infinite unfolding of divine grace, the eternal expression of divine love, the continuous revelation of divine presence. Stop fighting, stop struggling, stop trying to demonstrate truth through personal effort. Instead, rest, be still. Become transparent to the Christ consciousness that already is your true identity. The victory is already won. The battle is already over. All that remains is for you to awaken to this reality and live from it. This is the promise. This is the truth. This is the way of the mystical Christ. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. In stillness we discover what effort could never achieve. In surrender, we find what struggle could never win. In transparency, we become what we have always been, the very presence of God made manifest.
For 30 years, Joel Goldsmith searched every religion, every philosophy, every healing method known to humanity. What he discovered in a moment of desperate silence changed everything we thought we knew about God, healing, and the very nature of reality itself. This wasn't just another spiritual teaching. Most people pray to God, asking for things, begging for help, hoping for miracles from some distant divine power. Joel discovered we've been approaching this completely backward for centuries. The revolutionary truth he uncovered doesn't just heal bodies. It transforms entire lives in ways that seem impossible. The secret isn't about getting God's attention or becoming worthy of divine love. It's about realizing something so profound, so simple, that when you truly understand it, physical healing, emotional freedom, and material abundance become natural expressions of what you already are. This discovery shattered every religious assumption Joel had ever held. It challenged the very foundation of traditional Christianity and opened a doorway to what he called the mystical path, a way of living that makes miracles ordinary and transforms every moment into a sacred encounter. Here's what Joel realized that night in 1946 during his deepest spiritual crisis. God isn't separate from you, waiting somewhere in heaven to be contacted through prayer or worship. God is your very consciousness when it's free from the illusion of separation. This isn't philosophy. This is practical foundation for miracles. Think about it carefully. Every time you've experienced peace, love, or sudden knowing that transcended your circumstances, you weren't contacting something outside yourself. You were experiencing your true nature without the interference of fear-based thinking. Joel called this the Christ within, your divine identity. When you stop seeking God out there and recognize the divine presence as your own consciousness expressing itself as your life, something extraordinary happens. Problems don't get solved through effort. They dissolve because you're no longer creating them from a place of separation and lack. This recognition changes everything about how you approach challenges, relationships, health, and abundance. You're no longer a limited human being seeking help from God. Your divine consciousness itself, expressing as your individual human experience. Joel discovered what he called the practicing of the presence. But this isn't meditation as most people know it. This is a radical shift in how you perceive reality moment by moment. You stop seeing yourself as a human being having occasional spiritual experiences during prayer or meditation. Instead, you begin recognizing yourself as spiritual consciousness having a human experience. When this recognition becomes natural rather than something you have to remember to do, your entire relationship with challenges, health, relationships, and abundance transforms at the core level. The practicing isn't something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and evening. It becomes the foundation from which you live every moment of your day. You begin to see through the appearances of discord to the underlying harmony that's always been present. You start recognizing that what you call problems are actually invitations to go deeper into truth. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice seeing through appearances to spiritual reality until this seeing becomes more natural than breathing itself. This is where Joel's teaching becomes revolutionary and challenges everything traditional religion has taught about the relationship between humanity and divinity. He taught that the moment you realize I and the Father are one, you stop being a person who needs healing and become the very presence that does the healing. You're not trying to get something from God. You are the God presence expressing itself as your individual consciousness. But here's the part most teachers miss completely. This realization doesn't happen through effort, technique, or years of spiritual practice. It happens through what Joel called resting in the silence of being. When thoughts stop trying to fix, change, or improve anything. When the mind releases its grip on outcomes and solutions, truth reveals itself naturally. A woman came to Joel with terminal cancer that doctors said was incurable. Instead of treating her condition, he sat with her in this silence of being. Within weeks, every trace of cancer had disappeared from her body. The doctors called it medically impossible. Joel knew it was spiritually inevitable once the illusion of separation dissolved and her true spiritual identity was recognized and experienced. Margaret had struggled with chronic pain for 15 years that dominated every aspect of her daily life. Doctors, specialists, alternative healers, pain management clinics, nothing provided lasting relief. She'd tried every spiritual method imaginable, from positive thinking to energy healing. But the pain persisted relentlessly. When she finally encountered Joel's teaching through a friend, she was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything. The first breakthrough came not during formal meditation, but while washing dishes one ordinary Tuesday morning. She suddenly realized she'd been seeking healing as Margaret, the suffering person. In that moment of washing dishes, something extraordinary happened. Margaret, the person with chronic pain, disappeared from her awareness, and only pure awareness remained, awareness without pain, without story, without the identity that had been suffering for 15 years. The pain was simply absent. Within 3 months, the chronic pain that had defined her life for 15 years was completely gone. But more than that, Margaret discovered she was living from a completely different foundation. Fear-based thinking had lost its grip on her consciousness entirely, and life became an adventure rather than an endurance test. Robert was facing complete financial ruin after 20 years of building his business. Bankruptcy papers were being prepared, creditors were calling daily, and his marriage was falling apart under the crushing weight of financial pressure. Traditional positive thinking and manifestation techniques had only made him feel more frustrated and hopeless. Joel taught him something radically different from anything he'd encountered in self-help or prosperity teachings. Instead of trying to demonstrate prosperity or attract abundance from outside himself, Robert learned to recognize the abundance that was already present in his consciousness as his spiritual birthright. He stopped seeing himself as lacking and needing to attract abundance from some external source. As Robert began living from this recognition of inherent wholeness rather than acquired prosperity, opportunities appeared naturally without force or struggle. His consciousness shifted from scarcity to abundance. Within 6 months, not only was his business thriving beyond his previous success, but his relationships had transformed because he was no longer operating from fear and desperation. He was expressing from fullness rather than grasping from emptiness, and life responded accordingly. Sarah had been battling severe depression for most of her adult life, spending years in therapy and trying various medications that provided some relief, but never addressed the underlying emptiness. She'd tried meditation, spiritual practices, self-help programs. Some provided temporary uplift, but nothing created lasting transformation. Through Joel's teaching, Sarah discovered that depression wasn't something wrong with her that needed to be fixed through treatment or positive thinking. It was the natural result of consciousness believing it was separate from its source, cut off from the love and wholeness that is its true nature. When this fundamental belief in separation dissolved through recognition of her true spiritual identity, depression couldn't maintain itself anymore. The shift happened gradually over several weeks as Sarah began experiencing moments of causeless joy and deep peace that had no external reason or trigger. These moments expanded and deepened until they became her natural state, rather than temporary experiences. The person who had been depressed for decades simply was no longer there. A new foundation for living had been established that was unshakable by external circumstances. James had been seeking spiritual truth for 20 years through various teachers, traditions, and practices. He'd had profound experiences, moments of awakening and deep peace, but somehow always seemed to fall back into old patterns of thinking and reacting to life's challenges with the same fears and frustrations. What Joel revealed changed everything about James's approach to spirituality. James realized he'd been treating spirituality as something he did rather than something he was. He'd been seeking enlightenment as a future attainment, rather than recognizing his true nature as already enlightened consciousness temporarily forgetting itself. The moment he stopped seeking enlightenment and recognized his true nature as already enlightened consciousness, simply having a temporary human experience, everything shifted permanently. The spiritual search ended not because he found what he was looking for, but because he realized he'd never actually lost it. James describes it as coming home to himself after 20 years of looking everywhere else for what had always been present. The seeking ended, but spiritual living began in a completely natural, effortless way that integrated seamlessly with daily human responsibilities and relationships. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the primary realization of oneness, Joel developed what he called spiritual treatment. But this isn't treatment as most people understand it. This isn't sending thoughts, energy, or prayers to fix problems. It's recognizing the spiritual truth that dissolves the illusion, creating the appearance of the problem in the first place. When someone calls asking for help with a health challenge, financial crisis, or relationship conflict, a Joel Goldsmith practitioner doesn't try to heal the condition or solve the problem. Instead, they rest in the recognition that in spiritual truth, there is no person with a condition. There is only perfect spiritual being expressing. This recognition in consciousness has immediate and tangible effects in what we call the physical world. Symptoms disappear, relationships heal, financial situations resolve, not because something was sent to fix them, but because the truth of being dissolved the illusion that created the appearance of discord. The practitioner becomes a transparency for truth rather than a person trying to help another person. This complete shift in identity from helper to transparency for divine consciousness is what makes Joel's approach to healing so remarkably effective and permanent. Joel taught what he called spiritual discernment, the developed ability to see beyond appearances to spiritual reality in every situation you encounter. When you look at a magnificent sunset, You're not simply seeing colored light hitting particles in the atmosphere. You're witnessing infinite beauty expressing itself in form. This same discernment applies to everything in your experience throughout the day. When you see lack, discord, disease, or limitation, you're looking at appearances that have no spiritual reality. Spiritual discernment reveals the underlying perfection that's always present, always available to be experienced by consciousness. The practice isn't about denying what appears to be happening or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing what's really happening behind the appearances. Divine consciousness expressing itself perfectly, even when that perfection is temporarily obscured by limited perception. This recognition naturally transforms your experience without effort or struggle. You don't change the appearances, you see through them to reality, and the appearances naturally align with the truth you're recognizing rather than the illusion you were believing. One of Joel's most powerful and transformative techniques was what he called the art of dying daily. This isn't about physical death, it's about the daily dying of the personal sense of self that believes it's separate from God, from good, from the wholeness that is its true nature. Every time you catch yourself thinking as a person who lacks something, needs something, or fears something, you can let that personal sense die in that moment. In its place, you recognize yourself as the very presence of completeness, expressing itself as your individual experience of life. This dying to the personal sense becomes so natural and automatic that you begin living from spiritual identity rather than human identity, without effort or constant remembering. From this foundation, what humans call miracles become normal, natural expressions of what you actually are. The daily practice of dying to limitation and being reborn to truth creates a momentum of transformation that eventually becomes self-sustaining. You no longer have to work at being spiritual, you simply are spiritual consciousness expressing as human experience. Joel discovered that the key to permanent transformation lies in what he called the middle path, living fully human while knowing yourself as divine consciousness. You don't transcend the human experience or escape into some ethereal spiritual realm. You live human life from your true spiritual foundation. This means you pay your bills, maintain your relationships, care for your body, and fulfill your responsibilities. But you do all of this from the recognition of your true nature rather than from fear, lack, or the belief that you're separate from infinite good. The middle path dissolves the old spiritual misconception that you must choose between being spiritual and being practical. You become supremely practical because you're operating from truth rather than illusion, from abundance rather than limitation, from love rather than fear. Daily life becomes a continuous expression of spiritual principles rather than a distraction from them. Work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and the most ordinary activities become opportunities to express divine creativity and love. But let's be completely honest about the challenges you'll face as you begin living these truths. The mind that's been conditioned for years or decades to think in terms of separation, lack, and limitation doesn't instantly embrace these revolutionary ideas. You might experience what Joel called periods of spiritual dryness. During these challenging times, the old thinking patterns seem to return with a vengeance. You might doubt everything you've learned, feel like you're back where you started, or wonder if any of this spiritual understanding is real or just wishful thinking and self-deception. Joel taught that these periods are actually signs of genuine progress, not failure or spiritual regression. They're the final attempts of conditioned thinking to maintain its grip on your consciousness. The key is not to fight these experiences, but to continue resting in truth even when you don't feel it. These dark nights of the soul, as mystics have called them, are temporary and necessary parts of the transformation process. They're opportunities to prove that your spiritual understanding doesn't depend on feeling good or having positive experiences. Another common challenge that can derail spiritual progress is what Joel called spiritual pride, the subtle tendency to believe you're more evolved, more enlightened, or spiritually superior to others who haven't discovered these truths. This form of separation can actually block your continued spiritual unfoldment. The antidote to spiritual pride is genuine humility, recognizing that spiritual understanding is a gift of grace, not a personal achievement or accomplishment. You didn't earn or deserve this awareness any more than you earned the ability to breathe or your heart's ability to beat automatically. When spiritual pride arises, and it will arise subtly even in sincere seekers, return immediately to the simplicity of gratitude. Be grateful that truth is revealing itself through your consciousness, and let that gratitude dissolve any sense of spiritual superiority or separation from others. Remember that everyone is the same divine consciousness expressing at different levels of recognition. Your role is to be transparent for truth, not to judge others' spiritual development or try to convince them of what you've discovered. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of Joel's teaching is learning to live without the mental habit of trying to use spiritual truth to get something. The conditioned mind wants to turn these principles into techniques for manifesting desires, solving problems, or achieving better life circumstances. But the moment you try to use truth to get something, you've stepped back into the consciousness of separation. You've become a person who lacks something and is trying to use spirituality to acquire it. True spiritual living means recognizing that you already are everything you could ever need or want. This doesn't mean desires disappear or that you become passive about improving your life circumstances. It means your desires arise from fullness rather than emptiness, and their fulfillment happens naturally as expressions of what you are, rather than acquisitions by who you think you are. The shift from using truth to being truth is subtle but crucial. When you are truth expressing, your life naturally reflects that truth without effort, manipulation, or trying to make things happen through spiritual techniques. The ultimate challenge in Joel's path is what he called the final sacrifice, giving up even the desire for spiritual experiences, spiritual progress, or advanced spiritual understanding. As long as you're seeking something spiritual, you're maintaining the illusion of separation from what you seek. The resolution comes through grace. Spontaneous moments when seeking stops, not because you found what you were looking for, but because you suddenly realize the seeker and the sought are one and have always been one. These moments of grace can't be produced through effort, but they can be welcomed. When you stop trying to become spiritual and simply rest in what you are right now, the spiritual nature of your being reveals itself naturally. This is the end of the spiritual path because you realize there was never anywhere to go or anything to attain. The final sacrifice leads to the ultimate freedom, living without spiritual seeking while being constantly aware of your spiritual nature. You become ordinary in the most extraordinary way, completely human while completely divine. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Living Joel's teaching in daily life means bringing this consciousness of oneness into every situation, relationship, and challenge you encounter. When your coworker irritates you with their behavior, instead of reacting from personality and old conditioning, you recognize the Christ in them, and the Christ as your own true identity. This isn't about being nice, tolerant, or spiritually correct. It's about seeing through the personal appearances to spiritual reality. When you consistently see from this perspective, relationships become harmonious not because people change their behavior to please you, but because you're seeing their true nature. At work, instead of competing, manipulating, or struggling for advancement, you express your spiritual qualities, creativity, wisdom, love, intelligence, naturally and authentically. Opportunities arise because you're being authentic spiritual expression rather than a personality trying to get something. Your presence at work becomes uplifting to others, not because you're preaching or teaching spirituality, but because you're living from a foundation of peace and wholeness that others unconsciously recognize and are drawn to. In parenting, Joel's principles create profound harmony and understanding between parents and children. Instead of seeing your children as people you need to control, guide, or fix, you recognize them as spiritual beings expressing their divine nature through the temporary experience of childhood. This recognition allows you to guide and discipline from love rather than fear, from wisdom rather than control. Children respond to this spiritual recognition with natural cooperation because they're being seen and treated as the divine beings they actually are, not just as small humans with problems. Family conflicts resolve more easily because you're not taking personal behavior personally. You see through temporary emotional expressions to the permanent spiritual identity of each family member. This doesn't mean you become permissive. It means you respond from wisdom rather than reaction. The home becomes a sanctuary where everyone feels safe to express their authentic nature because they're being seen and loved for what they are, rather than judged for what they do or don't do. Financial challenges become opportunities to prove spiritual principles in practical, tangible ways. Instead of seeing money as something external you need to attract, earn, or struggle for, you recognize abundance as the very nature of infinite consciousness, expressing itself as your experience. This doesn't mean becoming passive about money or ignoring practical responsibilities. It means approaching financial obligations and opportunities from spiritual abundance rather than material lack. You make wise decisions, work diligently, and manage resources responsibly from fullness rather than fear. Many practitioners find that as they live from this recognition of inherent abundance, their financial situations naturally improve not through struggle, manifestation techniques, or trying to attract money, but as natural expressions of the abundance they recognize themselves to be. Money becomes a tool for expressing love, rather than a source of security or identity. This shift in relationship to money often results in greater financial freedom because decisions are made from wisdom rather than fear or greed. Physical health becomes a natural expression of spiritual wholeness when you begin recognizing your body as the visible expression of perfect spiritual being, rather than a material thing that can get sick or break down. This recognition transforms your entire approach to health and healing. This understanding doesn't replace medical care when needed, but it provides the spiritual foundation that supports all healing, whether through medicine, natural methods, or spontaneous resolution. You work with healthcare providers from wisdom rather than fear, making decisions from wholeness rather than desperation. The body responds to being seen and treated as spiritual rather than merely material. Many practitioners report improved health, increased vitality, and faster healing as natural results of living from spiritual identity rather than material identification. You begin to understand that symptoms are often consciousness expressing imbalance, and as consciousness returns to its natural state of wholeness, the body naturally reflects that harmony. Health becomes normal rather than something you have to work to maintain. As Joel's teaching becomes your natural way of being rather than something you practice, you discover what he called the healing consciousness. You begin to have a positive, uplifting effect on everyone you encounter, often without saying anything specifically spiritual or trying to help anyone. People are naturally drawn to the peace they feel in your presence. They open up, share their challenges, and often find their own solutions simply through being around someone who is resting in spiritual truth, rather than reacting from personal conditioning and fear. This healing presence becomes so natural that you often don't realize you're having this effect on others. You're simply being yourself, your true spiritual self, and that authenticity creates space for others to connect with their own truth and find their own answers. You become a living demonstration of spiritual principles rather than someone who talks about them. This demonstration is far more powerful than any words because people can feel the reality of what you've discovered through your presence. Years of living these principles consistently create what Joel called spiritual stability, the developed ability to remain centered in truth regardless of external circumstances. Economic upheavals, health challenges, relationship conflicts no longer throw you into emotional chaos or mental confusion. You respond to life's inevitable challenges with wisdom and love because you're responding from spiritual identity rather than personal reaction. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or detached. It means your emotions arise from truth rather than illusion. This stability becomes a precious gift to everyone in your life. In times of crisis, you naturally become a source of calm, wisdom, and practical guidance because you're seeing clearly rather than reacting from fear or personal attachment to specific outcomes. People learn to trust your perspective because it comes from a place of spiritual discernment rather than personal opinion or emotional reaction. You become someone others can depend on for balanced, loving guidance. The ultimate fruit of Joel's teaching is what he called the mystical life, living in constant conscious communion with the divine presence that you are. Prayer becomes an ongoing recognition of truth rather than periodic asking for help, guidance, or intervention from an external God. Every moment becomes an opportunity to witness infinite love expressing itself as your experience and the experience of everyone around you. Work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and the most ordinary activities become expressions of divine creativity. You realize that the mystical life isn't separate from ordinary human life. It's ordinary human life lived from your true spiritual identity. Nothing in your external circumstances needs to change except the foundation from which you perceive and respond to everything. The mystical life is available to everyone because everyone is spiritual consciousness expressing as individual human experience. Joel's teaching shows you how to recognize and live from this truth consistently. This is what Joel Goldsmith uncovered in that moment of desperate silence. Not a new religion, spiritual practice, or self-improvement technique, but the eternal truth of what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, seeking, and spiritual effort. You are divine consciousness individualized, expressing as your unique human experience. The journey doesn't end with understanding these principles intellectually or having occasional spiritual experiences. It begins with living them moment by moment until they become more natural than breathing, more automatic than your heartbeat. This is your birthright, your true identity, your permanent spiritual foundation. You don't need to become spiritual, achieve enlightenment, or earn God's love. You need to stop believing you're anything other than the spiritual being you've always been. When this recognition becomes your natural state of consciousness, you discover that everything you ever sought through spirituality has always been your own true nature. The search ends, but life begins. Life lived from the foundation of truth, rather than the quicksand of illusion. This is Joel Goldsmith's gift to humanity, the recognition that what we seek, we are. What we hope to become, we already are. What we long for, we have never been without. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.